The winter morning felt colder than usual as Maria walked through the automatic doors of the grocery store. Her worn-out jacket barely kept the December chill away, and her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out a crumpled shopping list from her pocket. 5 names were written at the top in her careful handwriting. Carlos, 12, Sofia, 10, Miguel, 8, Anna, 6, and baby Luis, just 18 months old. Below the names was a list of basic necessities that seemed impossibly long for someone with only $37 in her purse. Maria had been working to part-time jobs since her husband Roberto left 6 months ago. He had walked out one evening after another argument about money, leaving behind only a note saying he needed to find himself. She never heard from him again. The reality of raising 5 children alone in their small apartment had hit her like a freight train. Her morning job at the laundromat paid minimum wage, and her evening cleaning job at the office building barely covered rent. There was never enough left over for proper groceries, clothes, or the small luxuries that make childhood bearable. As she walked through the store aisles, Maria carefully calculated every item. A loaf of bread, $2, a gallon of milk, $3.50, rice, beans, some chicken that was about to expire and marked down. She moved methodically, her practiced eye scanning for the cheapest options. Other shoppers rushed past her with full carts, their children asking for toys and treats. Maria's heart ached, thinking about her own children at home. She's probably fighting over the last bowl of cereal. Near the baby formula aisle, Maria stopped. Little Luis had been crying more lately, and she knew he needed the special formula the doctor recommended. But at $24 per container, it might as well have cost $100. She stood there for several minutes, holding the can in her hands, weighing her options. If she bought it, there would be no money left for anything else. If she didn't, Luis would continue to suffer. That's when she noticed him. An elderly man in his 70s, well-dressed but not flashy, was standing a few feet away looking at baby supplies. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his kind eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled at a passing child. Something about his gentle demeanor made him seem approachable, like a grandfather who had seen enough of life to understand its struggles. The man, whose name was Henry Thompson, had indeed lived through many struggles. He had grown up during the Great Depression, served in the military, worked his way through college, and built a successful small business from nothing. He had been married to his beloved wife Eleanor for 47 years before losing her to cancer 2 years ago. Since her death, Henry had been living alone in their large house, spending his days volunteering at the local community center and trying to find ways to honor Eleanor's memory of helping others. Maria found herself studying Henry's face as he examined different products. There was something about his expression that reminded her of her own father, who had passed away when she was 22. Her father had always told her that good people could be recognized by the kindness in their eyes, and this stranger definitely had that quality. As Henry reached for a container of baby food, he accidentally knocked over a display of formula cans. They scattered across the floor with loud clanging sounds that echoed through the aisle. Without thinking, Maria rushed over to help him pick them up. Her hands worked quickly, gathering the cans and restacking them neatly on the shelf. "You so much, dear," Henry said, his voice warm with genuine gratitude. "These old hands aren't as steady as they used to be." "It's no problem at all," Maria replied, surprised by how natural it felt to talk to this stranger. "Are you shopping for your grandchildren?" Henry's expression grew slightly sad. "No, I volunteer at the community center. We have a program that provides supplies for new mothers who are struggling. My wife Eleanor started it before she passed away. She always said that taking care of babies was the most important work anyone could do." Maria felt her throat tighten with emotion. Here was someone who understood the value of helping families in need, someone who might actually comprehend her situation. For a moment, she considered telling him about her struggles, about Luis, and the formula she couldn't afford. But pride held her back. She had never asked strangers for help before, and the shame of her situation felt too heavy to share. "That sounds like a wonderful program," she managed to say. "Your wife must have been a very special person." "She was," Henry agreed, his eyes brightening with memory. Eleanor believed that every child deserved to be healthy and loved, regardless of their family's circumstances. She used to say that sometimes God puts people in our path who need help, and other times God puts people in our path who can provide help. The trick is recognizing which role you're supposed to play. As they talked, Henry noticed Maria's worn clothing, the way she clutched her small purse tightly, and how her eyes kept drifting back to the expensive formula. His years of volunteering had taught him to recognize the signs of a family in crisis. There was something about this young woman that reminded him of the mothers who came to the community center, proud but desperate, trying to do everything right for their children while the world seemed stacked against them. Maria excused herself and continued shopping, but she couldn't stop thinking about Henry's words. The idea that people were put in each other's paths for a reason resonated with something deep in her heart. As she made her way to the checkout counter, she made a decision that would change everything. She took one container of formula and slipped it into her jacket pocket, her hands shaking as she did so. She had never stolen anything in her life, but the sound of Louise crying that morning echoed in her mind. Sometimes being a good mother meant doing things that felt wrong to everyone else, but were necessary for your child's survival. The weight of the hidden formula felt like a stone in her pocket as she paid for her other groceries. The cashier, a teenager who looked bored and tired, barely glanced at Maria as she counted out her exact change. $37 became $18.43, and Maria walked toward the exit with her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Maria had almost made it to the parking lot when she heard footsteps behind her. Her blood turned cold as a firm hand touched her shoulder. She turned around to see a store security guard, a middle-aged man with a serious expression and a badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me," the guard said quietly but firmly. His voice wasn't unkind, but it carried the weight of authority that made Maria's knees feel weak. The world seemed to spin around her. As she followed the guard back into the store, other shoppers turned to stare, and Maria felt her cheeks burn with shame. All she could think about were her children at home, waiting for her to return with groceries and formula for Louise. What would happen to them if she went to jail? Who would take care of them? In the small security office behind the customer service counter, the guard asked Maria to empty her pockets. With trembling hands, she pulled out the container of formula and placed it on the desk. The evidence of her desperation sat there like an accusation, and she couldn't bring herself to look at it. "This formula costs $24, the guard said, examining the container. "Why didn't you just pay for it?" Tears began to flow down Maria's cheeks as the question hung in the air. How could she explain that $24 might as well be $24,000 when you had 5 hungry children and rent due next week? How could she make him understand that she had spent the last hour calculating whether she could afford a single apple for each of her kids? "I have 5 children," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My baby needs this formula, and I couldn't afford it. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know what else to do." The security guard's expression softened slightly. He had been working retail security for over 10 years, and he had caught many shoplifters. Most were teenagers stealing for thrills or drug addicts looking for items to sell. It had been a long time since he had encountered someone who was clearly stealing out of genuine need, rather than greed or addiction. "Ma'am, I understand you're in a difficult situation," he said more gently, "but I still have to call the police. It's store policy for any theft, regardless of the circumstances." Maria nodded, unable to speak through her tears. She thought about calling her sister Carmen, but Carmen was barely getting by herself, with 3 kids and a husband who had been laid off from his construction job. There was no one else to call, no family member with money or resources who could help her navigate this nightmare as they waited for the police to arrive. Maria sat in the small chair across from the security guard's desk and tried to compose herself. She thought about her children's faces when they realized she wasn't coming home. Carlos, her 12-year-old, was responsible for his age, but he was still just a boy. How would he handle taking care of his younger siblings if something happened to her? The office door opened and Maria looked up expecting to see a police officer. Instead, Henry Thompson walked in, looking concerned and determined. He had witnessed Maria being escorted back into the store and had asked the customer service manager what was happening. When he learned about the situation, he had asked to speak with whoever was in charge. "Excuse me," Henry said to the security guard. "I understand this young lady took something without paying for it. I'd like to pay for the item and any additional fees the store requires." The security guard looked confused. "Sir, are you related to this woman?" "No," Henry replied simply. "But I believe everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes people make desperate choices when they're trying to take care of their families." Maria stared at Henry in disbelief. This stranger, whom she had met just 30 minutes ago while helping him pick up scattered formula cans, was offering to help her in the most humiliating moment of her life. She wanted to protest, to tell him she didn't need his charity, but the words wouldn't come. The truth was, she desperately needed his help. "That's very kind of you, sir," the security guard said, "but the police have already been called. Not sure if paying for the item now will change anything." Henry sat down in the empty chair next to Maria. "What's your name, dear?" he asked gently. "Maria," she managed to say through her tears. "Maria Gonzalez." "What happened here today doesn't define who you are," Henry said. "I've lived long enough to know that good people sometimes have to make impossible choices. My wife Eleanor used to volunteer at a food bank, and she met many mothers who were struggling just like you are. She always said that society should judge itself by how it treats its most vulnerable members." The police officer arrived 15 minutes later. Officer Janet Rodriguez was a woman in her early 40s who had 2 teenagers of her own. She had responded to many shoplifting calls over the years, but something about this situation felt different from the moment she walked into the security office and saw an elderly gentleman comforting a young mother who was clearly devastated by her circumstances. Henry explained the situation to Officer Rodriguez, emphasizing that he wanted to pay for the stolen item and any associated costs. He also mentioned that Maria had helped him earlier when he had accidentally knocked over a display, showing that she was fundamentally a good person who had made a mistake out of desperation. Officer Rodriguez listened carefully to everyone involved. She looked at the formula container, noted its price, and observed Maria's obvious distress. As a mother herself, she could imagine the desperation that would drive someone to steal baby formula. As a police officer, she knew that prosecuting Maria would likely cost the taxpayers more money than the formula was worth, especially if it resulted in the state having to provide emergency care for her 5 children. "Mrs. Gonzalez," Officer Rodriguez said, "Mr. Thompson has generously offered to pay for the formula and any additional fees the store requires. The store has the option to press charges or to accept payment and consider the matter resolved. Given the circumstances and Mr. Thompson's willingness to help, I'm going to recommend that the store accepts payment and release you with a warning." The security guard looked relieved. He had been dreading the paperwork involved in pressing charges against a mother who was clearly trying to feed her baby. "If Mr. Thompson pays the $24 plus a $50 administrative fee, the store will consider this matter closed," he said. Henry immediately agreed to the terms and pulled out his wallet as he counted out $74. In cash, Maria watched in amazement. This stranger was paying nearly twice the cost of the formula to help her avoid criminal charges. She had never experienced such kindness from someone who owed her nothing. Outside the store, Maria couldn't stop crying. Henry stood patiently beside her as she tried to find words to express her gratitude. The December wind whipped around them, but Maria barely felt the cold. The shame and fear that had consumed her for the past hour were slowly being replaced by overwhelming relief and amazement at this stranger's kindness. "I don't know how to thank you," Maria finally managed to say. "You saved my life today. I have never stolen anything before in my entire life. My baby has been crying so much, and the doctor said he needs this special formula, and I couldn't afford it." Henry handed her the bag containing the formula and smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me, Maria. Sometimes we all need a little help. My wife Eleanor always believed that helping each other was what made us human." Maria clutched the bag to her chest like it was made of gold. I promise I'll pay you back. I don't know how or when, but I will find a way to pay you back. Every penny. I don't want you to pay me back, Henry replied, but I would like to know more about your situation. Do you mind if I ask about your children and how you ended up in this difficult position? As they walked to Maria's old car, she found herself opening up to Henry about her life. She told him about Roberto leaving, about working 2 jobs that barely paid enough to keep the lights on, about the constant worry of not being able to provide for her children. She explained how she had to choose between Luce's formula and buying enough food for the other kids, how she sometimes went to bed hungry so there would be more food for them. Henry listened without judgment, nodding occasionally and asking gentle questions that showed he was truly paying attention. His own memories of struggling as a young father came flooding back. He remembered the early years with Eleanor, when they could barely afford their tiny apartment and had to save 4 weeks to buy a single toy for their children at Christmas. Maria, Henry said when she finished her story, I want you to know that what you're doing for your children is heroic. Raising 5 kids alone while working 2 jobs takes incredible strength and love. You're not a failure because you needed help today. Maria's car was old and dented, with a cracked windshield and rust spots around the edges. As she fumbled for her keys, Henry noticed the car seat in the back and the toys scattered on the floor. This was clearly a vehicle that was used for family life, not just transportation. It reminded him of his own family's first car, which had seen them through many years of modest living. Where do you live? Henry asked. I'd like to make sure you get home safely. Maria gave him her address, surprised once again by his continued concern for her welfare. She had expected him to pay for the formula and disappear, having done his good deed for the day. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in her life and her children's well-being. That's not far from where I volunteer at the community center, Henry said. Would you mind if I followed you home? I'd like to meet your children, if that's all right with you. Maria hesitated. She was embarrassed about her small apartment, about the second-hand furniture and the toys that were held together with tape. But something about Henry's manner convinced her that he wouldn't judge her living situation. He had already seen her at her lowest point and had responded with kindness. Rather than criticism, okay, she agreed. But I need to warn you, the apartment is very small and not very fancy. Henry smiled. Eleanor and I lived in a place about the size of a shoebox when we were first married. Some of our happiest memories were made in that tiny apartment. The drive to Maria's apartment took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that had seen better days. Henry followed in his modest sedan, a car that was well-maintained but not expensive. He had always believed that flashy displays of wealth were unnecessary and often made people uncomfortable. As they drove, he thought about Eleanor and how she would have handled this situation. She probably would have invited Maria and her children to dinner and made sure they had everything they needed. Maria's apartment building was a 3-story brick structure that had been built in the 1960s. The hallways were clean but worn. The fluorescent lighting gave everything a harsh appearance. Maria lived on the 2nd floor in a 2-bedroom apartment that she had managed to keep despite the financial struggles. As they climbed the stairs, Henry could hear children's voices coming from behind Maria's door. The sound grew louder as they approached, and he could make out at least 3 different conversations happening simultaneously. It reminded him of his own childhood in a large family, where peace and quiet were rare commodities. Maria unlocked the door and called out, "I'm home." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Children came running from different rooms, all talking at once about what had happened while she was gone. Carlos, the oldest, was trying to maintain order while Sophia complained that Miguel had taken her favorite book. Ana was holding baby Luis, who was indeed crying and seemed hungry and uncomfortable. "Everyone, I want you to meet Mr. Thompson," Maria said, gesturing toward Henry. "He helped Mama today, and he wanted to meet all of you." The children stopped talking and stared at the stranger in their living room. Carlos stepped forward protectively while the younger ones gathered behind him. Luis continued to cry, and Ana tried to bounce him gently to calm him down. Henry looked around the small apartment with admiration rather than pity. Despite its modest size and second-hand furnishings, it was clear that this was a home filled with love. The walls were covered with the children's artwork and school projects. Books were stacked neatly on makeshift shelves, and toys were organized in bins around the room. Everything was clean and orderly, showing that Maria worked hard to create a good environment for her family despite their limited resources. "Hello, everyone," Henry said warmly. "Your mother tells me you're all very good at helping each other and taking care of your family. That's something to be proud of." Carlos relaxed slightly at Henry's gentle tone. "Are you a friend of my mom's?" he asked, still protective but curious. "I'm a new friend," Henry replied. "I met your mother at the store today, and she helped me when I dropped some things. I wanted to make sure she got home safely." Maria held up the bag containing the formula. "Mr. Thompson helped me get Luce's special formula," she announced. "Let me feed him right now." As Maria prepared the bottle, Henry watched the family dynamics with interest. Carlos was clearly the second parent, helping the younger children with their needs and maintaining order. Sophia was the little mother, trying to comfort Anna, who seemed tired and cranky. Miguel was the peacemaker, quietly picking up toys and trying to make everyone happy. These children were mature beyond their years, forced by circumstances to grow up faster than they should have. But they were also clearly loved and cared for, despite the financial hardships they faced. Henry could see Eleanor in each of them, the same spirit of helping others that had made his wife so special. When Luis finally stopped crying and began drinking his formula contentedly, the whole apartment seemed to relax. The other children gathered around to watch their baby brother eat, and Maria's face showed relief and happiness for the first time that day. "Mr. Thompson," Carlos said, "thank you for helping my mom. She works really hard for us, and sometimes she gets worried about things." Henry felt his heart swell with admiration for this family. Despite everything they had been through, the children were grateful and loving rather than bitter or angry. They understood their mother's struggles and supported her as much as they could. Henry spent the next 2 hours in the Gonzalez apartment, and those hours changed his life in ways he never expected. He listened to the children's stories about school, admired their artwork on the refrigerator, and helped Carlos with a math problem he was struggling with. Sophia showed him her collection of books, most of which had been donated by the school library when they were being replaced. Miguel demonstrated his ability to juggle 3 small balls that Maria had made from old socks and rice. As the afternoon progressed, Henry began to understand the full scope of the family's challenges. The apartment's heating system worked sporadically, so everyone wore sweaters indoors. The refrigerator contained mostly basic staples like rice, beans, and milk. The children's clothes were clean and mended, but clearly secondhand and getting too small. Despite these hardships, the apartment was filled with laughter, creativity, and love. Maria prepared a simple dinner of rice, beans, and the chicken she had bought that morning. She was embarrassed to offer Henry such a basic meal, but he accepted. Her invitation to stay with genuine enthusiasm. As they gathered around the small kitchen table, Henry was reminded of family dinners from his own childhood during the Great Depression, when his mother could make a feast from the simplest ingredients. "This is delicious, Maria," Henry said as he took his first bite. "You know, some of my best memories involve sharing simple meals with people I cared about." During dinner, Henry learned more about each child's personality and dreams. Carlos wanted to be an engineer and spent hours building structures with cardboard and tape. Sophia loved to read and dreamed of becoming a teacher so she could help other kids learn. Miguel was fascinated by music and could play songs on a small keyboard that Maria had found at a yard sale. Anna wanted to be a doctor who helped babies. Inspired by watching her mother care for Luis as the evening wore on, Henry found himself thinking about Eleanor and how she would have loved this family. She had always been drawn to children who needed extra support and families who were working hard despite difficult circumstances. He could almost hear her voice suggesting ways to help, planning activities to bring joy into their lives. After dinner, Henry helped clear the dishes and noticed Maria quietly calculating something on a small piece of paper. When he asked what she was figuring out, she explained that she was trying to determine if she had enough money to pay the electric bill that was due in 3 days. Even with her 2 jobs, the math was not working out in her favor. "Maria," Henry said gently, "you'd be offended if I offered to help with some of your expenses. Not as charity, but as an investment in your family's future?" Maria's eyes filled with tears again. Mr. Thompson, you've already done so much for us today. I can't ask you to do more. You're not asking, Henry replied. I'm offering my wife. Eleanor always said that money was only valuable if it was used to make people's lives better. I have more than I need, and you have a family that could benefit from some assistance. Henry explained that since Eleanor's death, he had been looking for meaningful ways to honor her memory. He had been volunteering and making charitable donations. But he had never found something that felt as personal and important as helping Maria's family. He saw in her children the same spirit of determination and kindness that Eleanor had always championed. That night, after Henry left with promises to return soon, Maria tucked her children into bed with hearts and stomachs fuller than they had been in months. Carlos, who shared a room with Miguel, asked his mother about their mysterious benefactor. Mom, why do you think Mr. Thompson wanted to help us? Carlos asked. He doesn't even know us. Maria sat on the edge of his bed, thinking about how to answer. Sometimes, mijo, God puts people in our lives exactly when we need them most. Mr. Thompson lost his wife, and maybe helping us makes him feel closer to her. And maybe we needed someone to remind us that there are still good people in the world who care about others. Over the next few weeks, Henry became a regular presence in the Gonzalez family's life. He would stop by after his volunteer work at the community center, always bringing something useful, but never making it feel like charity. Sometimes it was groceries that he claimed were extras from the center's food program. Other times, it was clothes that he said had been donated in the wrong sizes. Occasionally, he would bring small gifts for the children, always with a story about why he happened to have them. Henry's favorite visits were the ones where he could help the children with their homework or listen to their stories about school. He discovered that Carlos was exceptionally good at math and science, despite attending an underfunded school that lacked proper resources. Sophia was reading at a level far above her grade, but she had to rely on library books because the family couldn't afford to buy new ones. Miguel had a natural musical ability that deserved proper instruction and a better instrument. One evening in January, Henry arrived at the apartment with a proposal that would change everything. He had been thinking about the family's situation and had come up with an idea that would provide long-term stability rather than just temporary assistance. Maria, he said, as they sat in the living room while the children did their homework at the kitchen table, I have a suggestion that might sound unusual, but I hope you'll consider it carefully. He explained that his large house had been feeling empty and lonely since Eleanor's death. He had been considering what to do with all the extra space and had realized that it could provide a better home for a family that needed more room to grow. He offered to let Maria and her children move into his house, not as tenants or charity cases, but as family. I'm not talking about adoption or anything legal, Henry clarified quickly, seeing Maria's shocked expression. I'm talking about creating a family of choice, people who care about each other and support each other. You would have your own space and privacy, but the children would have room to spread out, a good school district and a stable environment. Maria was speechless. The offer was more generous than anything she had ever imagined, but it also felt overwhelming. Moving in with Henry would solve many of their practical problems, but it would also mean accepting help on a scale that felt enormous. I need time to think about this, Maria said finally. I need to talk to the children. This decision affects all of us. Henry understood completely. Take all the time you need, Maria. This offer will stand for as long as you need to consider it. I just want you to know that having your family around would make me happier than I've been since Eleanor passed away. That night, Maria gathered her children for a family meeting to discuss Henry's offer. She explained the situation honestly, emphasizing both the benefits and the responsibilities that would come with living in Henry's house. The children listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about how their lives would change. Carlos was the first to speak. Mom, Mr. Thompson has been like a grandfather to us. If he wants us to live with him, maybe it's because he needs us as much as we need him. After 3 days of family discussions and careful consideration, Maria decided to accept Henry's adoption proposal. The decision wasn't easy, but every conversation with her children reinforced the same conclusion. Henry Thompson had become more than just a benefactor to their family. had become the grandfather figure her children had never had, and they had brought joy and purpose back into his life after Eleanor's death. The legal process began immediately with Henry's lawyer, Patricia Morrison, who was experienced in family law. The paperwork was extensive, requiring background checks, home studies, and court appearances. Roberto was served with legal notice of the adoption proceedings, as required by law, but he never responded or contested the process. During the first month of legal proceedings, Henry experienced moments of doubt that surprised him. He had never raised children before, and sometimes he wondered if he was too old to take on such enormous responsibility. What if something happened to his health? What if he couldn't provide the guidance these children would need as they grew into teenagers and young adults? These concerns led to late-night conversations with Maria, who had her own worries about the adoption process. She feared that she might lose her role as the children's primary parent if Henry became their legal father. They spent many evenings working through these concerns, establishing clear boundaries and expectations for their unique family arrangement. Henry Maria said during one of these conversations, "I need you to understand that I will always be their mother first. Adoption makes you their father legally, but it doesn't change my relationship with them or my responsibility for their upbringing." Henry completely agreed with Maria's concerns. He had no desire to replace her as their parent or to undermine her authority in any way. What he wanted was to provide stability, security, and the kind of male role model that had been missing. From their lives, they worked together to create a parenting plan that respected Maria's primary role while giving Henry meaningful involvement in the children's daily lives. The home study process was thorough and sometimes stressful. A social worker named Jennifer Banks visited their home multiple times, interviewing family members separately and together, observing their interactions, and evaluating the living situation. Ms. Banks is particularly interested in understanding the children's feelings about the adoption and ensuring that they weren't being pressured into accepting a situation they didn't truly want. Carlos impressed the social worker with his mature understanding of the situation and his genuine affection for Henry. During his individual interview, he explained how Henry had helped him with his math homework every night and had started teaching him about investing and financial planning. "Mr. Thompson treats us like we're important," Carlos told Ms. Banks. "He listens to our ideas and makes us feel smart." Sophia showed Ms. Banks her room, which had been transformed into a young reader's paradise. Henry had installed bookshelves and filled them with classic children's literature and contemporary novels appropriate for her reading level. "Before we lived here," Sophia explained, "I could only check out 3 books at a time from the library. Now I have hundreds of books that belong to me forever." Miguel demonstrated his piano skills for the social worker, playing a simple piece that Henry had been teaching him. His improvement over the past few months had been remarkable, and it was clear that having access to quality instruction had unlocked a natural talent. "Papa Henry says I might be able to get a scholarship to music school someday," Miguel told Ms. Banks with obvious pride. Anna's interview was conducted while she colored pictures at the kitchen table. She drew a family portrait that included Henry, Maria, all of her siblings, and even Eleanor as an angel in the sky. When asked about her feelings regarding the adoption, Anna explained that Henry was already her grandfather in her heart. So making it official just made sense. The social worker spent considerable time observing Henry's interactions with baby Luis. The bond between them was undeniable and deeply moving to watch. Henry had developed his own routine for caring for Luis, including specific songs he sang during diaper changes, and a special way of bouncing the toddler that always made him laugh. Luis would light up whenever Henry entered the room and had started saying Papa clearly when he wanted Henry's attention. Ms. Banks also interviewed neighbors, teachers, and Henry's friends to get a complete picture of the family dynamic. Feedback was universally positive. Teachers reported that all the children had shown remarkable improvement in their academic performance and social behavior since moving in with Henry. Neighbors described seeing the family working together in the yard, going on walks, and engaging in activities that demonstrated their close bonds. The financial evaluation was straightforward but important. Henry's retirement savings, pension, and Social Security benefits provided more than adequate income to support the expanded family. He had also purchased additional life insurance and established college funds for each child, demonstrating his long-term commitment to their welfare and education. During the waiting period for court approval, Henry made another significant decision that demonstrated his dedication to the family. He officially changed his will to name Maria as the children's guardian and the executor of his estate if anything happened to him before they reached adulthood. This legal arrangement ensured that the children would remain with Maria and continue to receive financial support even if Henry was no longer there to provide it personally. The children adapted to their new school district better than anyone expected. Carlos joined the robotics team and discovered that his mechanical aptitude and problem-solving skills made him a valuable team member. Sophia started a book club for younger students and found that she enjoyed helping other children discover the joy of reading. Miguel auditioned for the school choir and was selected despite having only a few months of formal musical training. As spring turned to summer, Kea the Thompson family established traditions that helped solidify their bonds. Sunday morning pancake breakfasts became a weekly celebration where everyone shared their plans and goals for the coming week. Evening story time brought them together in the living room, where Henry would read aloud while the children listened and Maria worked on her GED studies. The most meaningful tradition developed around Eleanor's memory. Henry created a special photo album filled with pictures of Eleanor and stories about her life. Once a week, usually on Friday evenings, the family would look through the album together while Henry shared memories and explained how Eleanor's values and beliefs continued to guide their family decisions. The children began to feel connected to Eleanor, even though they had never met her. By late summer, the legal process was nearly complete. The final court hearing was scheduled for early October, and everyone was excited about making their family official. Henry had arranged for professional photos to be taken after the adoption ceremony, wanting to document this milestone in their lives. He had also planned a special celebration dinner at the children's favorite restaurant, followed by a family movie night at home as they prepared for the final hearing. Henry reflected on how much his life had changed since that day in the grocery store. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into the most meaningful relationship of his life. He had gained not just 5 children, but a sense of purpose and joy that he thought he had lost forever when Eleanor died. The adoption finalization hearing took place on a crisp October morning, exactly 10 months after that fateful day in the grocery store. Judge Sarah Chen had reviewed all the documentation and was impressed by the thoroughness of the home study and the clear evidence of a loving, stable family environment. The courtroom was small and informal. It's designed to make family proceedings feel less intimidating and more celebratory. Maria sat in the front row wearing her best dress, a navy blue outfit that Henry had given her for the occasion. The children were lined up beside her, each dressed in new clothes that Henry had bought for this special day. Carlos looked mature and serious in his first real suit. Sophia wore a pretty pink dress with matching shoes that made her feel like a princess. Miguel fidgeted with his tie but beamed with excitement. Anna sat quietly, clutching a small stuffed animal that Henry had given her. Luis, now almost 2 years old, babbled happily in Maria's arms, oblivious to the legal significance of the moment, but clearly comfortable and secure. Henry sat at the petitioner's table with his lawyer, wearing a suit that Eleanor had bought him for their 40th wedding anniversary. In his jacket pocket, he carried a small photo of Eleanor that he had shown to the children many times. He felt her presence strongly that morning, as if she was there to witness the completion of something they had both dreamed about for decades. Judge Chen called the case and asked Henry to state his intentions for the record. Standing at the podium, Henry looked back at the family that had changed his life so completely and spoke from his heart. "Your Honor," he began, 11 months ago, I was a lonely widower who thought his chance to be a father had passed. Then I met Maria and her children, and I realized that families can be created in unexpected ways. These children have brought joy, purpose, and love back into my life. I want to give them my name, my protection, and my commitment to support them for the rest of my life. Judge Chen asked Maria if she consented to the adoption and understood its implications. Maria stood and spoke clearly about how Henry had saved her family, not just from poverty, but from despair. She explained how he had shown her children what it meant to have a loving father figure and how he had given them hope for futures they never thought possible. Your Honor, Maria concluded, Mr. Thompson didn't just help us when we were desperate. He chose us as his family, and we chose him as ours. This adoption is making official what has already been true in our hearts for months. The judge then spoke to each child individually, asking if they understood what adoption meant and if they wanted Henry to be their legal father. Carlos spoke confidently about his gratitude and excitement. Sophia recited a poem she had written about finding a new grandpa. Miguel said he was happy because Henry was teaching him to play piano and promised to never leave them. Anna simply stated that she loved Henry and wanted him to be her forever grandpa. Even Luis contributed by clapping his hands and saying Papa Henry clearly for the first time. Judge Chen reviewed the final paperwork and made her ruling. Based on the evidence presented and the clear best interests of these children, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Carlos, Sophia, Miguel, Anna, and Luis Gonzalez will henceforth be known as Carlos, Sophia, Miguel, Anna, and Luis Thompson, with all the rights and responsibilities that adoption entails. The moment the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in quiet celebration. The children rushed to hug Henry, who was crying openly for the second time in his adult life. The first time had been at Eleanor's funeral. This time, the tears were of pure joy. Maria embraced her new father-in-law, overwhelmed by gratitude for the man who had taken a chance on her family when they needed it most. The lawyer took official photos of the new Thompson family, documenting the moment when 5 children gained a father and grandfather, and 1 elderly man gained the family he had always wanted. Henry immediately called the local newspaper, which had been following their story since word spread about the adoption. The reporter who interviewed them was moved by the obvious love and bond between Henry and his new children. That evening, the Thompson family celebrated with a special dinner at home. Henry had arranged for a cake decorated with "Welcome to the Thompson family" written in colorful frosting. The children took turns sharing their favorite memories of the past year and their hopes for the future as official members of the Estrenson family. Carlos announced that he wanted to study engineering in college so he could design buildings that would help families like theirs have safe, affordable homes. Sophia declared her intention to become a teacher and open a library in their neighborhood, so other children would have access to books. Miguel played a song on the piano that he had composed himself, dedicated to his new father and his mother. Anna drew a picture of the whole family, including Eleanor as an angel watching over them from heaven. The transformation in all their lives was remarkable. Maria completed her GED within 6 months of the adoption and enrolled in community college courses to study social work. She wanted to help other struggling families navigate the social services system and find the resources they needed. Henry supported her educational goals completely, often watching the children while she studied or attended classes. Henry's own life was enriched in ways he had never anticipated. He joined the Parent-Teacher Association at the children's school and became an active volunteer in their activities. He coached Carlos's science team, helped with Sophia's reading program, attended Miguel's piano recitals, and never missed Anna's preschool performances. Other parents initially wondered about the elderly man who showed up to every school event, but they quickly learned to respect his dedication and love for his children. The children flourished in ways that exceeded everyone's expectations, with stable housing, adequate nutrition, and access to educational resources. Their natural talents and intelligence had room to grow. Carlos maintained straight A's and was accepted into an advanced science program at the high school. Sophia tested into gifted reading classes and began writing her own stories. Miguel's piano playing improved dramatically, and he was invited to perform in a youth concert series. Anna excelled in her preparation for kindergarten and showed early signs of the intelligence that ran in her family. Baby Luis grew into a healthy, happy toddler who considered Henry to be his primary father figure. He would toddle around the house, calling for Papa Henry when he needed comfort or wanted to play. The bond between them was especially precious to Henry, who had never experienced the pure love and trust of a very young child. 2 years after the adoption, Henry made one final legal arrangement to ensure his family's permanent security. He updated his will to leave everything to his adopted children, with Maria serving as the executor and guardian, if anything happened to him before they reached adulthood. He also established college funds for each child and set up a trust that would provide ongoing financial support for Maria's education and the family's needs. But the most important legacy Henry created wasn't financial. He had shown 5 children that they were worthy of love and investment, that their dreams were achievable, and that families could be built on choice and commitment rather than just biology. He had given Maria the opportunity to rebuild her life and pursue her own goals while maintaining her role as their mother. Most significantly, he had proven that one person's decision to help a stranger in desperate need could transform multiple lives in profound and lasting ways. The story of the Thompson family spread throughout their community and eventually reached national attention through social media and news coverage. Henry and Maria were invited to speak at conferences about non-traditional families and the power of intergenerational relationships. They used these opportunities to advocate for policies that would help other struggling families and to encourage others to look for ways to support children in need. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting in the grocery store, the Thompson family returned to that same store for a celebration. Henry had arranged with the manager to donate baby formula and other necessities to families who couldn't afford them, creating a permanent fund in Eleanor's memory. The same security guard who had caught Maria shoplifting was still working there, and he was amazed to see the transformation in her life and her children's futures. Standing in the baby formula aisle where their story began, Henry reflected on the unexpected ways that life can change in a single moment. One act of desperation and one act of compassion had created a family that none of them could have imagined. Eleanor's belief that people are put in each other's paths for a reason had proven true in the most beautiful way possible. The Thompson family continues to thrive, bound together not by the circumstances that brought them together, but by the love, commitment, and mutual support they have chosen to maintain every day since then. Their story serves as a reminder that families can be created through choice, that kindness has the power to transform lives, and that sometimes the most desperate moments can become the foundation for the most beautiful futures.